Well, everybody, I have got very big news to report besides me being sick and my voice sounding terrible. This is some news from Nintendo. You heard it here first, okay? Here it is. And that is that they have announced their brand new console, the Nintendo Switch 2. Oh, okay. Apologies, everybody. Upon further review, it turns out I am about 3 weeks late to this announcement. Yeah, I know you definitely did see this. It was a very simple trailer, but it was a reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2. It is supposed to come out later this year, and obviously it is very much the talk of the town. So I probably don't have to explain to you why I was a bit confused when I saw this. So earlier this week there was a shareholder Q&A with Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa, and they talked about mobile apps that Nintendo develops, both games and just support type apps. Now at first when I saw this, I was like, well, hold on, Nintendo makes apps? But then of course I realized I was being dumb. I forgot about, obviously, Pokemon Go. That's kind of the big one, which actually, funny enough, that is not developed or published by Nintendo. That is actually by a company called Niantic, but Nintendo does develop quite a bit of apps. You've obviously heard of like Pokemon Sleep. That came out a couple years ago, and then obviously Nintendo Music was a big one last year, and there are a bunch of other ones as well. In fact, when asked about these mobile apps during this Q&A session, Shuntaro actually mentioned that there are currently 3 apps that they are still actively supporting, and that is Fire Emblem Heroes, Mario Kart Tour, and Super Mario Run. I am surprised to actually hear this. It's one thing to know about like these support type apps, or kind of more just like alternative game apps, but I never knew that they had like full games on like the iOS App Store, for example. Now obviously, don't get me wrong, I'm sure they saved the really good games for the console. We're probably not getting Super Mario Galaxy anytime soon on the iOS App Store. I wish we did have that, but the only way to do that is by a little thing that I think kids are calling breaking out of jail. Something like that. Getting your Apple device out of jail. I don't know. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. No, but yeah, obviously we know that these big Nintendo games, they are saving for the Switch, but they still have quite a bit of games that are on the App Store. Now, while I was kind of surprised that there were so many of these games and these apps that I just didn't know about, it turns out these are very much working for Nintendo, because as I said, Shuntaro was asked about these apps during this Q&A session, and he basically said that yeah, Nintendo is finding great success from them and they are going to very much continue to support them. He actually said that the total amount of downloads for all Nintendo apps is a whopping 900 million. Yeah, they are about to hit 1 billion downloads. But digging deeper into his response to this question, because he talked a bit about this, it's very clear why Nintendo is supporting these apps, because, you know, to me, I would think, well, this makes no sense. Especially around this time, I would think they obviously would just want to support the Switch 2. You know, obviously try to incentivize people to get that at launch. You don't want people getting like mobile apps and games, stuff like that. Well, no, it turns out actually the exact opposite of that is true. According to Nintendo, more people will buy the console for Nintendo, whatever it is at the time. Obviously, nowadays it's going to be the Switch 2. Yeah, more people are going to buy it because of these mobile apps and games on just the simple app store for like iOS or Google. And the reason for this is because essentially he sees these mobile apps as a like a gateway drug. Full disclosure, he did not use that term at all. That is just my term that I'm using. But no, he does make a very good point actually. So he says, quote, "It is true in recent years that many people's first game platform has changed from being a Nintendo dedicated video game system to a smart device, and given this environment, we have considered various ways to utilize smart devices, and we will continue to deliberate on this topic." And he basically goes on to say that they will therefore utilize these mobile apps, as well as other ventures like theme parks and stuff, but mainly these mobile apps, to get people hooked on the Nintendo IPs, you know, get them interested, get them wanting more, and obviously that would make them want to go out and buy a Switch 2. And yeah, he's absolutely right. You know, back in my day, I feel old saying that, but you know, my first Nintendo developed game was probably, I don't know, like Super Mario 64 or Pokemon Yellow, and obviously those were on Nintendo consoles. And really, those were like my first games pretty much ever. And yeah, a lot of kids that grew up in like the 90s or the early 2000s, 2000s? Well, I mean, if you're one of those kids, you'll know that, your first video game was probably on a Nintendo console or like a PlayStation. But nowadays, that's not the case. Kids pretty much have their first video game experiences on smart devices, which is probably not a very good thing when you really think about it. But I suppose that's a topic for another day. He obviously does make a very good point. So essentially skipping out on Nintendo games, or at least some of them on the mobile apps stores, would make Nintendo ultimately lose out on potential customers. I think this is a great strategy if you really think about it, even in these days as we are obviously getting ready for the Switch 2, and obviously they want to sell as many units as they can. But according to Nintendo, in order to do that, they kind of have to play the long game. So yes, these mobile games, these mobile apps are going to continue to be supported by Nintendo for a very, very long time.